Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Triple Crown Wargaming once again with me, the Duke, and, well, it has been quite the day in the old world. There's lots of articles, even a couple of battle reports for me to talk about with you guys today. So, I'm going to apologise in advance to Editor Max putting this video together because I'm probably going to be all over the place, but I'll do my best to stick to one article or battle report at a time, but we'll see how we go. So, starting off, we are going to have a look at their unit filler almanac, which is actually a really short one. Just shows off a couple of unit fillers that they made for the Tomb Kings and the Bretonnians. One thing that I was quite surprised about, actually, given Games Workshop's sort of more recent history with the subject, is they're actually incentivizing, suggesting almost, kit bashing, which, historically, a few years ago, was a big part of a lot of people's hobbies. It still is a big part of a lot of people's hobbies, but it was something that Games Workshop encouraged back then. More recently, it really hasn't been, so I was surprised to see this article come out, to be honest. But this also gives you an idea in terms of events, particularly Games Workshop events or official events, that they are going to be very accepting of unit fillers. You would expect so, given that Games Workshop have put an article out on it. They give you some ideas for unit fillers. I think the Tomb King one they mention covers, actually I think both of them, the Tomb King and the Bretonnian one, cover 6 models. So they're on a 50 by 75, 6 inventory models. And they say that would fit nicely in a 20-man unit. So actually that covers quite a lot of the unit. It's almost a third of the unit. So which in, Triple Crown events in the past, we've generally tried to limit it to a quarter. Sometimes we will allow up to a third, but it really is sort of on a case-by-case basis, I suppose. It's got to look like you've got enough of the models, for it to be reasonable unit filler. But I think this is a really good sign from Games Workshop that actually they're going to be very accommodating, very encouraging of unit fillers, and perhaps we're moving back to a time maybe where they're going to start encouraging this side of the hobby more and make it more of a big part of their battle reports, of their things, reports in White Dwarf and things like that. Perhaps we'll get some articles in White Dwarf of how to make certain unit fillers, things like that. I think that would be really cool, and certainly something they've done before but not done for a while. Other than that, this article, there's not really much in there, so I think we'll move on to much bigger news, which was their other almanac from today, which is their round table on the past and future of a Stone Cold classic. Now, I'm not going to go through this whole article because I've got a lot to go through today with 2 battle reports, but I'm going to sort of skim through. I'm going to give you the highlights or lowlights, depending on your point of view. Now, basically, this article is talking about the look of the old world, similar to, I think, yesterday's one, about, the sort of graphically how the old world looks. This is a lot about the physical sort of painting of the models more, sort of talking with, I believe, with some of the heavy metal team who painted some models, as well as obviously the team that's been working on the old world rules-wise. They talk about, going through the archives. They mentioned retooling molds and creating new molds for what were metal models that they're bringing back in Forge World resin, which I think we all know. They've mentioned that before. Something like the Bretonnian Trebuchet, for instance, was metal, then was fine cast for a little bit, but they're actually bringing it back in Forge World resin. So I think you can probably expect to see quite a lot of that. Although I imagine where they still have the metal mould and it was usable, they may well just stick to those models in metal, hence we've still got metal granites, things like that. I imagine that's what the sort of deciding factor is. Perhaps it's that they can't make a Forge World resin mould for certain models. I don't know the ins and outs of model moulds, but I'd imagine that's sort of the deciding factor. Now, the big part about this article, this almanac's about halfway through, they talk about the legacy factions. Now, I'm going to do a little bit of direct quoting here from Rob, who's a member of the team that the article writer was talking to, and he goes on to say, a few of the factions from the previous Warhammer Fantasy Battle game will not feature in Warhammer the Old World. That's in terms of game rules, model ranges, and the ongoing background narrative. As we know, these legacy factions are going to get a free downloadable PDF for army lists, so that, you know, people can play the game with their old armies. I'm sure the expectation will be to play with those models upsized in bases, as we saw yesterday from the Warhammer the Old World social media team, at least, in their comments. And if you haven't seen all that, check out our reaction video from yesterday, which was all about the base sizes that they revealed. But back to this article. So we're going to hear more about that in the coming weeks, about these legacy factions. However, they are not going to be considered legal for tournaments. Now, obviously, this is official Games Workshop tournaments they're talking about here. So from Games Workshop's point of view, they are not considered legal armies for tournaments, and they're not going to receive ongoing support. Now, this article only came out at the time of recording a few hours ago, and we've already had a lot of questions, understandably, from people who have bought tickets to our Derby Deathmatch event in May this year, which is obviously going to be a Warhammer the Old World event, asking if they can use their legacy factions. Now, categorically, right now, yes. I'm saying yes, you can. You will be able to use the legacy factions, assuming that their PDFs are out in time for the event. So, assuming that the PDFs are out at least 4 weeks before the event, you will be able to use those armies at Derby Deathmatch in May. So you don't have to worry about that. If you wanted to use your Dark Elves, your Lizardmen, your Vampires, whichever faction, you will be able to use them as long as that PDF is out in time for the event. And as it says in the pack, the expectation will be that your overall unit size represents the correct size if the models are on the correct size bases. So that means you can individually upsize each base. It means you can put them on space trays, etc. It goes into a lot more detail in the pack. If you do want to check it out, head over to triplecrownwargaming.com, head over to the downloads page, and you'll see the pack there. All the information is in there. But yes, assuming the PDFs are out in time, and we think they will be, we think they're not going to be held off for too long. Games Workshop have actually given two very different answers to this. One of the almanacs said, in due course, I think it was, I can't remember the exact wording, or a short while after, something along those lines, with regards to when the PDFs will be coming out in relation to the release date of the Old World. However, some comments on social media from the Warhammer the Old World Facebook page have said they will be out at release. So we're assuming that difference in time isn't going to be a very big one, but we don't know. But yeah, assuming the PDFs are out at least 4 weeks before, you will be able to use them, so don't worry. And going forwards, we'll look at that in a bit more detail as sort of events get nearer. But I'm pretty sure a lot of independent tournament organisers will sort of go along with those lines as well. I'm sure they'll let you, obviously, if you are going to another tournament, it's well worth dropping the tournament organisers a message and just asking them, give them a little bit of time, because obviously they've only got this information now as we have. They're going to need a little bit of time to make their decision, but I'm sure they'll get back to you as soon as they can. Now, with regards to the rest of this article, they do talk a lot about maps and about how there's some little hidden Easter eggs in there, arcing all the way back to 3rd edition Warhammer, some of them apparently. I only played 8th edition, so I must say anything from before then is probably gone well over my head. But I'm sure the more historical fantasy players among you will have noticed a lot of things hidden in those maps. I've got to say, as much as we've had a lot of maps for the Old World, I do like them. They do look very cool. They're very, typically Warhammer. And the fact they're actually releasing that map, the physical map, putting it on pre-order tomorrow, this Saturday, the 6th, I think is very cool. I think that will be very popular for a lot of people. And yeah, we're certainly going to try and get one, I think, because who doesn't want a big old Warhammer map? It's going to be awesome. And then, yeah, they sort of go into, again, they've talked about this before at the very end of the article, that this is very much a sort of amalgamation of a lot of the editions of fantasy. It's not just 8th, it's not just 6th, it's not just 4th. You know, it's a bit of everything, picking the elements that they really like from each of the editions, which, you know, I really don't mind. I think that's probably the best way to do it, to be honest. But I think the whole article was, I think, a bit brought down in a lot of people's opinions by the whole bit about legacy factions, but we're going to move past that because we have had today two, that's right, not one, two brand new battle reports published for the old world. Now, technically one of these came out yesterday. Games Workshop released their one on Warhammer Plus for their subscribers yesterday. However, they released it free on YouTube today. Now, before I get into those, there's another almanac all about the arcane journals. So, and to be fair, I think this is probably a worthwhile one because I think a lot of people online, you know, looking at Facebook pages and things like that, a lot of people are concerned that they're going to have to buy these arcane journals and they're going to be, you know, carrying around loads of books all the time for their armies. They don't want to do that. And actually this article makes it quite clear. You don't need the arcane journal to play the game. The Forces of Fantasy or the Ravening Hordes book, depending on which side of the good and evil coin you are on, will have rules for you, all the rules that you need for your army to play the game. The arcane journals are just supplements that they work alongside that, the Forces of Fantasy and the Ravening Hordes. You still need that book, but if you want to get the arcane journal, they just work alongside that. They contain a bit more background, a few more images, things like that, and they also contain additional rules that will be used alongside the ones you find in Forces of Fantasy and Ravening Hordes. We really need to come up with a phrase to encapsulate those two books. But yeah, that's for another day. As I said, absolutely not required. The two main books will contain all the rules that you absolutely need, but the journals, and specifically now the Kingdom of Bretonnia and Tomb King of Khemri ones, they will include things like, and they go on to say, specific laws of magic, like the Law of Nehekara and the Law of the Lady. So it does look like potentially each army will eventually be getting its own unique Law of Magic. That'll be quite cool. Unique abilities, like some extra knightly vows for the Bretonians, and resurrecting the fallen for the Tomb Kings. Some special rules for both armies, Arrows of the Asaph for the Tomb Kings, which they had in 8th edition, which we'll get onto a little bit, well, which they mention in one of the battle reports. I imagine both of the battle reports, both of them are Bretonians versus Tomb Kings, unsurprisingly, which is essentially the same as it was in 8th. You shoot with no penalty to your ballistic skills. So, you know, solid. And Blessings of the Lady, which again, you see in both of the battle reports, pretty much the same as it was in the 6th edition book that was used in 8th, as well as getting extra magic items, which is cool. And obviously you've got those cards that you can pre-order tomorrow, potentially from Games Workshop as well, depending on how well their website works, with those sort of reference cards with all of those extra items in as well. Now, on top of all of that, you also get some different ways to play those armies. So, essentially themed army lists, which are the Armies of Infamy, which we saw mentioned. Oh, what almanac was it in? It was the Building Your Army one. I can't remember how long ago exactly it was. A couple of weeks, probably. A few weeks. And for the Bretonians, that was the Bretonian Exiles, I think it was called. And there was an Errantry Crusade one as well. So they'll give you essentially different lists to build your armies from. And then, you know, some specific special rules that you gain for that formation. Things like that. Nothing, you know, major, I wouldn't have thought, but who knows? They could be completely super powerful and it's the only thing anyone ever uses. I don't think they will be like that. Could be wrong. Who knows? We'll have to wait and see. They do preview one of the special rules that you'll get for using one of these lists. The Bretonian one first, the Exile list. You get the Exile's Vow. So it's a chivalrous vow, a bit like Knight's Vow or Questing Vow or Grail Vow is going to be, I would have thought. And models with this rule have the Stubborn and Veteran special rules. Now, we've seen Stubborn, and we will see it in the screenshots from one of the battle reports that I'll get onto in a little bit. Not seen Veteran. No idea what that's going to do. So that's an interesting new rule. And it basically means you don't have to take a panic test when levies or peasants are destroyed within 6 of you, or if they flee through you as well. So a bit like the Knight's Vow with a little bit extra on top. So yeah, don't mind that. And then the Tomb King one that they preview as well. So whilst units are within the general's command range, then friendly models whose troop type is chariot, so all your chariots re-roll the dice when they determine the number of impact hits they cause, making them a lot more powerful. Yeah, really like that. Again, it really sort of builds into the theme of the list, I think, these special rules, which I really like. Big fan of that. Was always a fan of any sort of narrative, event, game, scenario, anything like that in 8th edition. And yeah, I'm looking forward to the Old World's take on that as well. The final thing, I know there's a lot in this almanac, isn't there, actually? I didn't realise there was this much. The final thing from this almanac is they actually give you one of the narrative scenarios. So each almanac will have one narrative scenario that you can recreate. And the one they give us is from the Bretonnian Arcane Journal, which is the Battle of Matarea. So this is Sir Cecil Gaston defending against a force led by Cetra, with reserves, a rescue force, being led by the Duke of Brion, supported by Lady Elise Duchard, that beautiful Forge World special character for the Bretonnians that they showed off back in November, I think, last year. Essentially, it's, the Bretonnians are split into two, the main force, reserve force, and there's specific win conditions for the mission. But yeah, just a really nice way, I think, of being able to recreate specific scenarios that are clearly going to form part of the narrative of the Old World. So yeah, big fan of that. You're not going to play it all the time, but it's nice to give you something a little bit different to use and to, mix it up. Once you've played a dozen or more games of Old World, you might want to mix it up a little bit. So that's it for articles, really. And then we are going to get on to the battle reports. So the first one I'm going to talk about is Games Workshop's one. So this was, as I say, on Warhammer Plus yesterday, Thursday, and they released it on YouTube for free today. So I've got some screenshots, mainly of generic rules. There's a few army-specific ones, but as I said, it is Bretonnians versus Tomb Kings, and this is actually the starter boxes against each other. So it's the whole forces from each of the starter boxes. So you've got the new Duke on Royal Pegasus for the Bretonnians, and you've got the Leech Priest and the new Tomb King model, which they use as a Tomb Prince. But that Leech Priest on Bone Dragon, Necrolith Bone Dragon, I think is the full title, for the Tomb Kings as well. So nice new big models, seeing them, how they work as well, which is very cool. The first screenshot, though, we're going to go through this roughly in order of how they appeared in the battle report. The first one, they talk about victory points. Now, mission-wise, they are playing meeting engagement, and that is exactly the same as it was in 8th edition. So if you want to see how that mission works, go back to the 8th edition rulebook. That's how it works. But victory points, a little bit different. So you do still get, obviously, all of the points if you kill a unit. Very simple. However, each enemy unit that's fleeing at the end of the battle is worth half of its points, rounding up. And each enemy unit that's been reduced to less than 25% of its starting unit strength, not models, unit strength, although I imagine that will probably be the same sort of thing, at the end of the battle is worth a quarter of its points, again, rounding up. I don't know how that's going to work if a unit is below 25% unit strength and fleeing. I don't know if you're going to get 75%. I don't know how that worked in previous editions, or if you'll just get the higher, so you'll just get the 50%. Not sure. I'm sure it will clarify that when we get the full rulebook. You still get 100 points for killing the general with the king is dead, and trophies of war is now 50 points for each enemy standard that is claimed as a trophy, as described on page 200. So I'm imagining that's still going to be you have to kill it in combat or run it down. You're not just going to get it for shooting a unit off. Additionally, you get 50 points for killing the battle standard bearer, or if he's fled the battlefield or fleeing when the game ends. So by the looks of it, you could shoot a battle standard bearer off and get those extra 50 points, whereas a unit standard, you might have a certain condition that you have to fulfill to actually claim that banner. But I don't think, in general, not too different, those last two from 8th edition, just the points are slightly different on the banner element. Now, though, into special rules. The first one that really comes up is the Nar Undead rule. So, well, I was going to say annoying, not annoying, but a bit upsetting that we don't just get a general undead rule, because obviously it would help for all those vampire counts players out there as well. But I can't imagine it will be too different. It never was in 8th edition. It's pretty much the same. But yeah, units that are Nehekar and undead, they can't march unless they've got the fly special rule and are choosing to move by flying. Now, we've not actually seen exactly how fly works, and they don't go into it in this battle report either. They don't show you the fly rule. They just move the models that are flying. So we'll have to wait and see exactly how that works. But in addition to that, they have the fear, which we have seen, and there'll be a screenshot of fear a little bit later. Immune to psychology, which means you are immune to fear and terror. Unbreakable and unstable. And a character with this special rule can't join a unit without it, and vice versa. So no real difference there. Very similar to how it was in 8th edition. Tomb Kings also can resurrect their models, a bit like they could in 8th, a bit like Vampire Counts can, or could in 8th. There is a slight difference here, though, in that characters are healed first. So assuming the character hasn't just been killed outright, if he's down to a wound or whatever the case may be, if he's still there but he's been wounded, characters are healed first, which I believe is the opposite way round. Actually, in 8th, I don't think you could heal characters for Tomb Kings at all. So yeah, that's a big buff for the characters there. So they get healed first. Then any models with more than one wound that have taken a wound, then it's command, and then it's unit champion, then standard bearer and musician. Now, I know for vampire counts, you could never regrow, as it were, resurrect the standard bearer. Not sure about the musician, but you can never resurrect the standard bearer. I don't know if that was different for Tomb Kings, but potentially another little change there, and then it's just rank and file models. Other than that, no real big differences in resurrecting models. Tomb Kings also still have the Hierophant rule, which is the main sort of wizard of their army, basically. If that character is slain, then all friendly units lose the Regeneration special rule. So this, we don't know if this is a Tomb King specific rule, that all their undead get regeneration, or if it's just an undead rule. Perhaps that will be what forms the undead rule. Who knows? We'll have to see. But it looks like in the battle report, most things have regeneration 6. Their characters have regeneration 5+. We'll get into exactly what regeneration is a little bit later, but it's generally the same as what it was in 8th edition. In addition to that, at the end of the phase that this model was removed from play, then you essentially take a leadership test, and if the test is failed, you crumble. You lose a number of wounds equal to the amount by which the test is failed. So just to be clear, because I think I said that a bit wrong, if your Hierophant is on the table, then you have the regeneration rule. If he's off the table, he's dead, you don't. And then the phase in which he is removed from play as a casualty, and then during each of your start of turn sub-phases in that strategy phase, then you take a leadership test and crumble. One thing I haven't really got a screenshot of because it's not really screenshotable, but worth mentioning, alternating deployment still in. That's still very much a thing. They do mention that. Sticking with deployment, scouts. The Tomb King Horse Archers, I think it was, had scout. There is, I think, exactly the same as how scouts worked in 8th edition. Can't see any differences there. Still got to be 12 inches away from the enemy, and they still can't declare a charge during their first turn. Oh, that is a slight change, actually, because it used to be in 8th, they couldn't declare a charge if you went first and had the first turn, but if you went second, they could. Looks like now they can't. So a little bit of a change there. Vanguard is also still in. Again, they didn't put the rule up for me to screenshot it, but it now appears that it will just be a normal move based on your movement rather than a fixed 12 inches. Don't hate that, actually. I think it makes a lot of sense. So yeah, quite like that. On to the game itself then. So, the first special rule, the very new special rule, new in terms of 8th edition anyway, I have no idea if this was in previous editions, is the reserve move. So, unless a unit charged, marched or fled during the movement phase of its turn, then it can make a reserve move at the end of the shooting phase of its turn after all shooting has been resolved. So, unit making this moves exactly as described in the basic movement rules. It can maneuver, but it can't march. So this feels like very sort of hit and run, I imagine this will be on particularly fast units, what used to be fast cav perhaps, think Clade Riders, think Dark Riders, Lyrium Reavers, that sort of thing. all elven, but yeah, that sort of thing. Maybe Pistoliers for the Empire as well, who knows. Really nice though, keeps them a bit safe, lets them, you know, do their damage and then get out of danger as well. I like that a lot. Stand and Shoot works pretty much the same as it did in 8th edition, except now, crucially, Undead can choose to stand and shoot. So that's a big change, because obviously before, it didn't matter so much for vampires, but before Tomb Kings couldn't stand and shoot, they had to declare hold. That doesn't seem to be the case anymore. They can now stand and shoot, which is nice. Also looks like you don't suffer the -1 for standing and shooting either, which again is a definite buff for standing and shooting. Volley fire, I think we've seen before. Generally it's on bows by the looks of it, longbows in particular. Half the models in each rank other than the front rank can shoot in addition to the front rank. And they can do that, and they can't do that if they stand and shoot or if the unit moved for any reason. So if it stayed still and it's making a normal shooting attack, you can shoot with half of the additional ranks. If it's standing shooting or if it's moved, no volley fire, just the front rank for you. Armor Bane we've definitely seen before. If you roll a 6 to wound, then the AP characteristic of the weapon is improved by the amount in the X. I think we've only ever seen Armor Bane rather -1, or Armor Bane 1, so it only improves it by 1. But I guess that keeps the door open for potentially higher levels of Armor Bane in the future, which could be cool. Regeneration then. So, in general, this is the same as it was in 8th edition. It's a save, effectively, of whatever is in the bracket. However, different to 8th edition, same as it was in 6th, I believe, it is in addition to your ward save. So you'd take an armor save, then a ward save. If you fail both of those, if you've got a ward save, if you fail both of those, then you can take a regeneration save. However, difference being, regeneration wounds that are saved by regeneration are still counted for the purposes of combat results. So you'd have to keep a bit of a tally separate of wounds that you saved from regeneration. Also, it does mention at the bottom of this little square that units with regeneration are often vulnerable to flaming attacks or magical attacks. However, as we will learn if you watch the battle report, flaming attacks don't necessarily ignore regen. There has to be another special rule, flammable, which will then make flaming attacks ignore regen. No idea how regen interacts with magical attacks. We don't actually get to see that in the battle report. But potentially it'll be the same. Potentially magical attacks will just ignore regeneration entirely. We don't know. But some quite big changes, I'd say, to regeneration. You know, top level stuff, it works the same way. But when you get into the details of it, yeah, I think some quite big differences. Now, fear. So I think we've seen fear before. I think they've showed us this off in an almanac. Let me know if I'm wrong down below and if this is the first time we're seeing fear. So if a unit wishes to declare a charge on a model that causes fear and has a higher unit strength, it must first take a leadership test. If the test is failed, the unit cannot charge, it does not move, and is considered to have failed a charge. Now that's massive. Can't do anything else. If you found that leadership test, you are stuck in no man's land, potentially. That's a big deal. If the test is passed, you can charge as normal. Then, additionally, if a unit is engaged with an enemy that causes fear and has a higher unit strength, when its combat is chosen during the choosing fight subphase, it must take a leadership test again. If the test is failed, any models in the unit that direct their attacks against the fear-causing enemy suffer a -1 to their hit rolls. So, not as damaging as the weapon skill one before it to most things, but much more consistent. And, you know, essentially, if you charge a fear-causing unit and you've effectively got to take 2 leadership tests that turn because of fear. So, yeah, I think that's a big deal. In fact, ignore that last sentence, because the last little paragraph of fear says that you only need to make 1 fear test per turn. So, maybe you don't. I think they do in the battle report, though. I think they make or take a test for both. So, perhaps it means if you're in combat with 2 fear-causing enemies, you only take 1. Not sure. Hopefully the rulebook clarifies that a little bit. Models that cause fear are immune to fear themselves, and a unit that doesn't cause fear does not become immune to it if joined by a character that does. I like that little caveat, makes things much clearer. Big fan of that. It also appears from the battle report that actually fear, or failing that fear check, lasts for the duration of combat. I think they mentioned that. Again, it doesn't come up on a screenshot or anything. They just sort of mention that. So yeah, it's definitely something to look out for, because it does look like you'd roll that every turn. It doesn't say, you know, until the combat ends. So yeah, definitely something to have a look at when we all get the rulebook actually in our hands in a couple of weeks' time. Whether fear does carry over for the duration of the combat. That would be really powerful if it does. Challenges, very much still in. They're basically, from what I can tell, exactly the same as they were in 8th. You can have one challenge per combat. You issue with a character or champion. You can accept with a character or champion. That character must be within or adjacent to a fighting rank. Yeah, all very much the same. No real differences. The only difference in terms of fighting the challenge, particularly for mounted models, is that you've still got Overkill. That's still a thing. I believe it's still capped at 5. Although, I'll be honest, it didn't come up in the battle report, so maybe there's no cap, not sure. However, previously, if you're on a ridden monster, for instance, and your character on top goes before the monster, kills the thing you're in a challenge with, the monster doesn't get to attack. Now, however, the monster does still get to attack that model you were in a challenge with for the overkill. So a much better chance of really racking those overkill points up. Big fan of that, actually. Doesn't make a lot of sense if you think about it, because that monster is just tearing apart a corpse at that point. But yeah, I quite like it in a game term. Charging then. So I feel like these were in the wrong order. Probably should have put charging first, but never mind, we're where we are. So if you charge an enemy in their front arc, you gain +1 initiative for every 4-inch moved before you make contact, up to a maximum of 3. If you charge them in the flank or rear, that maximum is up to 4. Again, +1 for every full inch move. So really making a difference for to units getting the charge being a huge deal. In 8th, it was like, nah, unless you had, you know, a weapon that got better on the charge, like a lance, for instance. It often really didn't matter who charged. Maybe if you're the Lawmaster and you always charge down a hill for the extra one, you know, it's +1 combat res, yeah, it's not that big of a deal. However, getting to go first, which this will be in most cases, not always, but most cases, getting to go first, particularly getting to go before characters, that's a huge one. That's going to be a really big deal, and I do actually really like that change. Big fan of it. Stomp attacks. We've seen these mentioned on profiles. I think Shaggoth, I think, Dragon Ogre Shaggoth, they showed off quite a while ago. He had Stomp D3, I think. I could be wrong, but I think it was Stomp D3. These are a little bit different. So they work in exactly the same way, effectively. Instead of being always struck last, however, they are just resolved at initiative 1, regardless of modifiers. So these don't get quicker if you charge. That's effectively what that means, I think, and they almost always go last. They hit automatically, unmodified strength, all that, same old. However, they're not restricted on unit types. You can stomp anything. If you've got the stomp rule, stomp 1, stomp D3, whatever it might be, you can stomp anything. As an example, you know, Pegasus, Royal Pegasus, which we know has stomp from the battle report, you can stomp cavalry, you can stomp chariots, anything you like. Big change. Not sure how I feel about it, but at least it does make those models much more consistent, because you know you're going to get that, as long as you've survived. You know you're going to get those automatic hits, which is quite nice. Now, this combat result table, we have seen this before in, I imagine, the combat article or almanac. However, something they didn't mention there, I don't think, and is not on this table, is that if you are a close order unit, now we have seen that before, I think it's generally going to be all non-skirmishy units. I think that's what are going to be close order units. You get an additional +1 to your combat res. I imagine that's what falls under other bonuses at the bottom of this table. But close order units always get +1 to their combat res. A nice little buff for them. Now, you can see as well that obviously rank bonus gives you an extra point per rank of combat res. They've not actually, I don't think, previously said what you need to claim a rank bonus, though. But they do clarify that here. So a unit in close order formation, if it is wide enough, can claim a rank bonus of +1 for each rank behind the first, up to a maximum determined by its troop type. So we'll actually get onto a little bit of clarification about that when I go through quickly the second battle report. But right here, that's basically saying that how many models a rank must contain to claim that rank bonus and the maximum bonus it can claim is determined by its troop type. So it's not just going to be 5 wide, you can claim up to 3 for everything. So they also don't actually go into what that is in the battle report, this battle report anyway. But as I say, they do mention it briefly in the second one. So we'll go through that one. I'll quickly run through that one. You've also got special rules that can increase the rank bonus a unit can claim as well, but rank bonus is very much still a thing, and it looks like you have to be in close order in order to claim that. Now, these two are very interlinked rules, these first charge and disrupted units. We've seen first charge, I think, we've at least had it mentioned. Bretonnian Ground Knights have this. It looks like all Bretonnian cavalry have this. And this rule is if the unit's first charge of the game is successful, then the charge target becomes disrupted until the end of the combat phase. So that's quite crucial. It's not just your first successful charge, it's if the first time you declare a charge, it is successful. So, big possibilities to losing this bonus, if they try and charge something that causes fear, for instance, and they fail that fear check, suddenly they can't do it, that's their charge, they count as failing it, first charge won't come into effect for their next charge. Big possibilities for getting rid of this bonus, because it is a big bonus. Because disrupted units, they are not counted as having any ranks, cannot claim a rank bonus. A unit is also disrupted, however, not just if they get charged by this first charge unit. They are disrupted if they are engaged in the flank or rear by an enemy unit with a unit strength of 5 or more. So no longer is it 2 ranks of 5 necessarily, just a unit strength of 5 or more. Or if it ends its movement with a quarter or more of its models within difficult terrain, or if it's standing over straddling something called a low linear obstacle. I'm assuming that's a wall or a hedge. But, we are yet to see. I'm assuming that's a wall or a hedge. I think most of the time, though, it's going to be if you're flanked or charged in the rear by something with a unit strength of 5 or more, or if you get charged by something like this unit with first charge. But yeah, really powerful not letting a unit claim that rank bonus, because as actually we saw from this battle report, combats were often very close. So getting rid of that rank bonus combat res score, really big deal. Over to what I imagine will generally be an undead specific special rule, unstable. So this essentially works in exactly the same way as it did in 8th edition. For every point you lose a round of combat by, you take an additional wound. On characters, you need to have killed the whole unit first before those wounds are allocated to characters. Again, pretty sure that's exactly how it was in 8th. No change there. Give ground, I'm pretty sure we've seen before. When a unit gives ground, it moves 2 inches directly away from the enemy unit or units that caused it to give ground. Without turning or pivoting, it literally just backs up. And it stops if it comes into contact with a unit or terrain. No sort of big surprises there. Like I say, I'm pretty sure we've seen that before. Yeah, I'm fairly certain we've seen that before. Back to another undead specific rule, potentially a Tomb King specific rule, actually. The Arise. This is their way of getting models back a lot of the time. So this is done during the command subphase. It's not a spell anymore. These always used to be linked to the spells of Tomb Kings and Vampires. Not anymore. It's just a command ability. It's a leadership test. If they pass it, then a single friendly unit that has the Nehekaran Undead special rule and is within 12 recovers a number of lost wounds depending on the unit type, essentially. If they're infantry or cavalry, then they get the level of wizardry of the model plus D3. If they are a chariot or a war machine, then it's the level of wizardry plus 1. If it's a monster, then it is just the level of wizardry. So the higher level wizard, the more wounds you get back. I like that. It's not, a huge deal because it's only one unit. Don't know if you can do that multiple times sort of across different wizards. It appears that you can, as long as they have this rule. So yeah, potentially lots of little wizards all over the place can help you get lots or more wounds back. But yeah, quite like that. I did like it related to spells because as the opponent you could do something about it. This you very much can't. I hope they fail the leadership test. That's about it. But yeah, overall quite like this. Fated Dispel. I think they've hinted at this, but not sure they actually said what it did. Essentially, even if you've got no wizards, or you can't make a wizardly dispel, then once per turn you can always make a fated dispel. It's just a straight roll off on the dice. You have to beat the casting value of whatever the opponent rolled to dispel the spell. So many rules that they show off in this battle report, but we're going to keep going through them. Inspiring Presence, essentially the same as it was in 8th. All friendly units within the command range of the general can use their leadership characteristic instead of their own. Even tells you to rally your general first. Nice and helpful. Panic tests. If during a single shooting phase a unit loses more than 25% of the models it contained at the start of that shooting phase, it must take a panic test. Not how many models it contained at the start of the game, and not 25%, has to be more than 25%. Slight changes there, and I've got to say I do like that. Much prefer that. Yeah, and if obviously the test is failed, they then panic. On to Restrain and Reform. So this is done once you win combat, essentially. If the unit flees or falls back in good order, or potentially gives ground. I'm not sure if they have to fall back in good order, or if just to give ground will do. But a unit that wishes to restrain and reform just takes a leadership test. If it's passed, it can remain where it is and make a free reform. Otherwise, it's got to follow up or pursue. Furious Charge. Now, this is something that the Pegasus Knights have. So this is the unit of Pegasus Knights, not the Royal Pegasus, I don't believe. If it charges more than 3 inches, then they get an extra attack each. Really like that. Big fan of it. Makes those smaller units of things like Pegasus Knights just hit a little bit harder. Big fan of that. Now, Terror. Fear's big brother. Models that cause terror are immune to fear. Models with the fear special rule, fear models that cause terror. That's a bit of a jumble, but essentially if you cause fear, your opponent causes terror, you count them as causing fear against you. How it worked in 8th. And a unit does not cause terror. A unit that does not cause terror doesn't become immune to terror if a character that does cause terror joins that unit. Same as with fear. Effects-wise, when a unit that causes terror declares a charge, the charge target must immediately take a leadership test. If they fail, they must flee. Same as it was in 8th. This is very different though. If the winning side of a combat includes one or more units that cause terror, each unit that belongs to the losing side must apply -1 leadership modifier to its leadership when it makes its break test. Big fan of that. I think that's something Terror should always have done. And I was a big proponent of Psychology doing more. And yeah, big fan of Terror's changes. Countercharge. So this, again, we've seen is on Bretonnian Knights. And I think, if I remember, this you can only do this against certain types of units, or maybe it's only certain types of units have it. Can't remember which way around it is. But essentially, if you have a charge declared against you, one of your charge reactions on certain units is countercharge. You pivot about your centre so that you're facing directly towards the centre of the charging unit, and you then move D3 plus 1 inches directly towards them. Now, and both units are then considered to have charged. As they show off in this battle report, because this was being questioned, certainly by my local gaming group, this countercharge move is moved first before the charges are moved. So suggesting you are effectively making that charge a bit easier. But obviously, if you've got lances, something like that, impact hits maybe, which we'll get onto in a second, then you are getting that bonus. So it can still very much be a buff for you. Oh, right, I promise I'm not going to keep you much longer. Just a couple more screenshots from this battle report. And the next one is impact hits. So these now seem to be very different across models. It's not just our chariots cause D6, as sort of generic as that. They seem to be very different. But essentially, they work in exactly the same way. You get these when you charge, although you have to have charged more than 3 inches. That seems to be a really big thing. You must have moved 3 inches or more. Now, I think that's because you count as recharging if you follow up against a unit that's given ground and moves back 2 inches, which means if you do count as charging, you won't trigger any of these effects, like impact hits, like what's another one that I'm trying to think of off the top of my head that I spoke about a minute ago. The initiative bonus. Perhaps you'd only get 2 rather than the 3. Things like that, I think it is why. Furious Charge, that was the one I was trying to think of. You won't get the Furious Charge bonus because you haven't moved 3 inches. I think that's why a lot of these things are triggered when you charge 3 inches or more. Instead of, always striking first, as they did in 8th edition, or always going before everything else, they just strike at initiative 10, regardless of modifiers, and again, hit automatically at the unmodified strength of the model with them. No huge surprises there, I don't think. And we're finally at the end of this battle report, but don't worry, there's another one to go. It's not as long, though. I'm not going to keep you here for an hour and a half. So, last couple of rules, stubborn. We've seen this, I think, as well, when they showed off the men-at-arms and the Growl Monk that gives them this with the Blessed Triptych. So the first time a unit is required to make a break test, it can choose not to and just automatically fall back in good order, even if the unit strength of the winning side is more than twice of the losing side. So that suggests that if the unit strength of the winning side is more than double that of the losing side, then that unit always flees, potentially, unless it passes. That bit of the sentence confuses me. Let me know down below if I'm just being silly and that's really clear to everyone else. Let me know what you think that means. Also, a unit that is not stubborn doesn't become stubborn when joined by a stubborn character. And a stubborn character can't use this rule as they're part of a unit that is not stubborn. That's a big change. Obviously, 8th edition, a lot of characters would just have the Crown of Command, that generic item that just made you stubborn. My Ogres had it a fair amount. That's clearly not going to be a thing anymore. Crown of Command might be in, who knows, but it won't give you stubborn because it won't do anything unless that character's on their own. Big change there for stubborn, and generally a big change in what it does, but I do like it. I think it's a good change. And speaking of that fallback in good order, when a unit falls back in good order, it is sort of retreating quite quickly, but not completely rallying. So it moves like a fleeing unit with the following exceptions. When it makes its flee roll, you roll 2d6 and discard the lowest. So you just roll the one. You just go the highest dice roll, effectively. And a unit that falls back in good order automatically rallies at the end of that flee move. So you turn around, go roll 2d6, pick the highest, go that distance, turn back around. Now, to me, because it's counted as effectively fleeing, I think that means if you fall back in good order and, hit a table edge, go off a table edge, you're going to count as destroyed because you're effectively fleeing. So I think that is something that has definitely been hinted at, definitely something that I thought is how it would work, and I think I've mentioned that on a video before, but to me, that feels like it confirms that is how that's going to work. And that, I think, is a big deal, because a lot of people were concerned that things just weren't going to break, things just weren't going to die, like units-wise from combat just weren't going to die, because breaking is seemingly quite hard. If we go back to that, I think it was the psychology, perhaps, it might have been the combat one, that sort of chart of giving ground, fall back in good order, and fleeing. You'd have to fail your modified leadership test. No, fail your unmodified leadership test, wrong way around, to actually flee. So units with high leadership are very unlikely to actually just flee. However, if you beat them significantly in combat and they're close to a board edge, they might just fall back in good order, but that can still kill them. So I think that's a big deal. Now, that was it from... that was a lot. That was all I got from the Games Workshop battle report. However, over on MiniWargaming, another YouTube channel which I'm sure all of you have heard of, very, very big YouTube channel, I believe in Canada they are based, could be wrong. They actually did a report of the Battle of Materia scenario that we looked at a little bit earlier. And there are a few more things. I'm not going to go through all of them because I will honestly be here with you all night. But I'm going to quickly blast through. Now, I don't have any screenshots of any rules or anything from this one. So I don't know what Max is going to put on the screen, but I'm sure it'll be lovely. So yeah, just going to blast through. So it feels like non-general characters are going to have a command range. Now, whether that means you can use the leadership of those characters in that command range, I'm not too sure. But it seems that the command range is tied to the leadership of the model. Bound spells. The power levels of them add to the roll to cast. So it's not just you need to hit that power level. They seem to have a casting value and a power level. So the power level of the spell acts like a wizard level, effectively. You can move within an inch of other models and terrain. Big change there. Couple of magic items that we know are still in, that were in 8th edition. Not sure if they'll do the same thing, but we know that a Ruby Ring of Ruin is still in, and the Talisman of Protection is still in. That one does seem to do the same thing, still a 5-up ward save. Catapults, any stone throwers, things like that. They now have to aim for the centre of a unit. You can't just, aim for the general who's on the corner of that unit. No, you have to aim for the centre of the unit. And, speaking of blast templates, if you're only partially covered by it, you're only hit on a 4+. So, this was hinted at, in one of the articles. I can't remember for the life of me which one it was. But it might have been the shooting one, actually, when they showed the Screaming Skull stat line. Very much hinted at there. But yeah, if you're only partially under the template, you're only hit on a 4+. Line of sight. True line of sight? No, not a thing anymore. In order to shoot a model, you have to be able to draw an uninterrupted line from your model to their model. I believe it's actually from your base to their base. Could be wrong on that one, don't quote me. So if there's a unit in the way, doesn't matter if that unit's, not taking up a load of the actual space, if there's just legs and you can see through the legs, doesn't matter. If there's a unit in the way, you cannot shoot. The exception to this is if either unit, the shooter or the target, is a large target. Then the intervening models don't matter if one's a large target. Skirmishers, they have 360 line of sight. That's a big deal. And I will say, actually, in both battle reports, the skirmish-looking units, so by that I mean ones that weren't, base-to-base contact with each other, didn't seem to need to be in any sort of real formation, apart from when they got into combat, when obviously they formed a rank of sorts. They don't count as having a rank bonus, but they formed a sort of rank of sorts. Otherwise, though, they were basically all over the place. Which, all those skirmish trays people have, maybe you don't need them anymore. Don't know how I feel about that. It probably isn't going to make a huge difference, to be honest. It means you can be much more fluid with how they, wrap around terrain, units, that sort of thing. Particularly now you've not got to stay an inch away from everything. What else have we got? Hexes and augments, or enchantments. I don't think they're called augments anymore, enchantments. You now need to be in the target of those spells now needs to be in the front arc of the wizard casting them. No more is it 360. I think that's a bit of a shame. I do sort of get it, but I think that's a bit of a shame. Also, sticking with spells, you can't cast a spell if you're in melee unless the range is self. Now, we saw this with, what spell? It was the Tomb King spell that they've showed off. I think it was Jaff's Incantation of Cursed Blades. I think it was that one. One that lets you reroll ones to hit. The range is self, but the description of the spell says, I think you can target any model within the wizard's command range. So, you can potentially still target another unit with the spell. However, the range of it, if you're in melee, has to be self. A little bit of a sort of odd interaction, I think, personally. When you charge, you can now wheel through friendly bases to make that charge. You can't move straight through them, but you can wheel through them. That feels very odd to me, I'm not going to lie. That will take a lot of getting used to. Not really sure that was a necessary change, but maybe it'll be a huge thing and everyone will get on board with it. I'm really not sure, to be honest. Stand and shoot, we mentioned it before. Looks like from this report that it now contributes to combat res as well, which, to be honest, I quite like. Gives the shooting units that little bit of extra help that they probably needed in combat if they do get hit by something. Big fan of that. Unbreakable units, they always give ground now rather than just staying where they are, so you are going to move things like that. Always strikes last, still a thing. However, it just sets your initiative to 1, but that's before modifiers. So that can then still be improved by charging. So if you charge more than 3 inches into the front of a unit, you're going to get initiative 4, effectively striking with things like great weapons, which is what we saw in this report. Questing Knights, I think, specifically. Heavy Cav, counting as 4 models for a rank rather than 5. So this is what I meant when we were talking about the rank bonus before, and it being sort of dependent on the unit type. Heavy Cavalry, you need 4 models to count as a rank, not the 5 that we're used to. You can also only claim 2 ranks as a rank bonus. Hordes, however, which we've seen on, I think it was Men-at-Arms, feels like it was going to be Men-at-Arms. Hordes can claim 3, so that's what Horde Rule does. Not sure if Horde does anything else, but that's all we've seen for Horde so far. You need a line of sight to charge, unless you're a large target, then apparently you don't. Feels a bit odd, but I sort of get that the idea of that is you can see over things and things like that. Don't hate it. Again, going to take a bit of getting used to seeing exactly how that works. One thing that is, or that has been, the last thing that I'm going to talk to you about, are we going to hit the hour? Who knows? The last thing I'm going to talk to you about is that something that's been hinted at from the Magic Almanac, and that is a limit to the number of Dispel attempts you can make. Now, there doesn't seem to be any sort of limit. If you have a wizard within, range, you can attempt to Dispel as many times as your opponent casts spells that turn. I really thought there was going to be a limit, to be honest. I really thought it was going to be, I don't know, your wizard level would limit it, or you'd get 1 Dispel if you're a level 1 or 2, or 2 if you're a level 3 or 4. But seeing this, that there's apparently no limit, I think actually is probably quite a good thing to get away from armies feeling like, or players feeling like their army has to contain a level 4. Because obviously if there was some sort of limit tied to wizard level at least, you'd really feel like you want a level 4 so that you can always Dispel, or, Dispel a lot of times. Whereas now, you just need a wizard in range. So a couple of level 1s or 2s are going to be just as, if not more effective, because they can cover more of the board, than a single level 4. So I do really, really like that, actually. I would definitely recommend checking out both the battle reports. As I say, one's on the Warhammer YouTube channel, one is on MiniWargaming. There was a lot of almanacs to go over today, and the battle reports, a lot for me to talk about. I hope you've stuck it out till the end, but in case you have, and you've forgotten what we went through at the start, which don't worry, I have as well. If you are coming to Derby Deathmatch in May, our event, it has sold out. If you did want tickets, email us. There is a reserve list. You can be added to it. But if you are coming, despite what today's almanac said, assuming the PDF rules are out for the legacy factions, you will be able to use those factions at Derby Deathmatch. Don't worry, okay? You can use them assuming the rules are out. But that is it from me today. I've kept you long enough, almost an hour. Thank you very much for joining me. Let me know down below if you have watched the battle reports, what you liked best about them, what you maybe are concerned about in regards to the games and what you saw. And, of course, if I got anything wrong, if you think I missed anything, please let me know down below. This was a lot to go through. But thank you very much for joining me. If you did like today's video, if you didn't get bored of my voice, check out all of our other Old World reaction videos here on YouTube. Make sure you hit that subscribe button as well. And then if you like all of that, there's loads of 8th edition content on there as well as heading over to triplecrownwargaming.com. You can sign up as a Knight of the Realm and get loads of exclusive content, battle reports, tactics videos, things like that over there as well. But thank you again for joining me, and we will see you next time.
Remember to tag your friends and like, subscribe and share. Then head over to triplecrownwargaming.com and become a Knight of the Realm today.
What are you doing, mate?
You alright? Do it for Warhammer!